Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchkalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Hare Krishna, devotees, again welcome. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your attendance, your interest. So we're going to study Sri Isopanisad, very important book amongst Srila Prabhupada's books. First of all, let's just do a little bit of a general introduction to the book. Isopanisad, it is one of the Upanishads. Upanishads are part of the four Vedas, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas. They're particularly, Upanishads are particularly connected with those literatures. And specifically, as we will see as we read through, I think next week we will see how Srila Prabhupada points out that Sri Isopanisad is part of the Yajur Veda. Yajur Veda. Rig, Sama, Atharva, and Yajur Vedas, the four Vedas. So Isopanisad is part of that Yajur Veda, and Srila Prabhupada also, elsewhere actually, he makes the point that the Isopanisad is spoken by the personified Vedas. If you're familiar with Srimad Bhagavatam, then if you've actually read the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, then you would know that in one of the later chapters is called prayers by the personified Vedas, and those personified Vedas, they were more of an impersonal type of nature, but through association, they became devotees. And eventually they became so much devotees that they offered beautiful prayers to Lord Krishna in that later part. I forget the exact chapter number, but it's in the last maybe 15 or 20 chapters of the 10th canto. And an interesting point about the personified Vedas is that not only did they become devotees from having been, not entirely on the personal side, somewhat on the impersonal side. So not only did they become devotees, but actually they developed the desire to serve Lord Krishna in the Madhurya Rasa, in the conjugal rasa, as gopis. Yes. And as we understand, Prabhupada discusses this in a few places, and it's discussed in the Vedic literatures here and there. they actually entered the Vrindavan pastime. They became gopis. Yeah. So Isopanisad is recited by them. And Srila Prabhupada chose, out of all the Upanishads, the only Upanishad that Srila Prabhupada translated and commented on was Isopanisad, because Isopanisad is very personal, or it's quite personal. Yeah. It's very clearly addressing the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a person, and encouraging and preaching to the readers to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and worship him and serve him in very personal ways, and recognize his personal arrangements for this material world, how this material world is running under the personal supervision of the Lord. Then it goes on to describe different personal characteristics, some of them contradictory, but personal characteristics. And then finally, right at the end, last few verses, the personified Vedas, they speak as if they're just about to die. They're just about to leave their bodies. And knowing that this is a very crucial time for getting where one really needs to get the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the last verses, they pray to the Lord very strongly that we want to see you. We want to see you, your personal form. But it's difficult because your personal form is obscured by your brilliant effulgence. Yeah. In other words, it appears from those last verses that the personified Vedas, the stage to which they had developed at the time they recited the Isopanisad, is that they're coming from the impersonal stage, and they've entered the personal stage, but not so long ago. And therefore, seeing that they've not so long ago left the impersonal conception and the idea of the absolute truth being light, being some sort of effulgence, that of course is a common idea amongst the impersonalists. So they have entered into already the personal understanding, and they've accepted that. But they're in the, you could say, somewhat earlier stages. So they can't, when the Lord appears to them, they can't just see him directly. They're still seeing the effulgence. And of course, the body of the Lord is behind the effulgence, because the effulgence is the effulgence of the body of the Lord. So it appears then that they're in that stage of development, having not long ago come from the impersonal phase, and now they've accepted the personal phase, stage or understanding. But there's still some sort of residue or something left over from before. Therefore, when the Lord comes to them, they don't just see him just like that. But they definitely want to see him, and they appreciate tremendously the value of seeing him. So they're begging and pleading, please remove that effulgence so we can see your face. Yeah. So it's very interesting. It's very inspiring. There are many interesting ideas which Srila Prabhupada expands upon. And we're going to go through all of this in detail. We're really going to go through in detail. So in Isopanisad, first of all, there is an invocation. Invocation basically means that it's an appeal. It's an appeal. It's describing the objective of the book, but it's trying to stimulate that, establish what is the basic idea, invoke the basic understanding. So there's the invocation, and then there are 18 mantras. Prabhupada doesn't describe them as texts. I mean, when as he lists them out, 1, 2, 3, as he goes through the book, but it's mantra 1, mantra 2, mantra 3, like this. So there's only 18 in the entire book. And we are going to spend 4 weeks on these 18 verses plus the invocation. Plus, Prabhupada gives an extensive introduction, several pages. And we'll go through that in detail also. But my point in mentioning that is that it's not a big book. If you take just the mantras alone, it's 2 pages. It's not a big book. But Prabhupada does give a quite extensive purports. Yeah, so, and he brings up many important points. Therefore, we are putting in quite some time into it. All right, so those are just a few words. The personified Vedas, eventually they become gopis, but that's later. That's definitely later. And this, there's the prayers of the personified Vedas. That's before they become gopis, but it appears to be after they speak the Isopanisad. Yeah, like that. Okay, so now devotees, I sincerely hope that you all have a copy of the book, the Isopanisad. We have extracted it. What we have done, actually, I have extracted it from Prabhupada's books on computer and separated everything out. And because, as we go through, then we come to page this, page that, with page numbers, of course. And so I will, as we go through, we'll be will be reading different passages from the purports, sometimes quite long purports. So we'll be reading passages, and I will say, this is now on page such and such, paragraph such and such, so we know exactly where to look. And when I do that, I will be referring to the page numbers from I have extracted. Now that, I hope, I assume, has been made available to all of you, so that when I say, for example, now, we're going to go through in a few minutes, we're going to go through the introduction. And according to Isopanisad, as I've taken it out of the Srila Prabhupada's books in the folio program, the introduction begins on page 3. So I'll be saying, yes, page 3, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4. This is what I'm going to be referring to. So you need a copy of that in order to know exactly where to look, just very quickly. So you don't have, if you've got a printed book, like from the BBT, so you don't have to go searching through to find what particular passage we're reading. I hope you follow the idea there, because we're going to be referring to the different paragraphs in the purports the whole time, really the whole time. That is going to be the main part of the whole seminar, just going into the purports, paragraph by paragraph, as we've done already with Nectar of Devotion. We did that. With the Bhagavad Gita, we did that, although it's easier because the purports are much shorter. So in other words, if you don't have a copy, either digital or printed, of the Isopanisad as I have presented it, please get one. Please get one to make your own life easier. Okay, so now, before we actually enter into the actual text as such, I am going to have a look in the overview book, the Isopanisad Student Guide Master Copy, okay? The study guide, not the actual text that we'll go into shortly, but I want to have a look at the study guide. Again, I really hope you've got the study guide. I sincerely hope. Yeah. On page 8 of the study guide, page 8, there is a brief analysis of all the different sections in Isopanisad. In Isopanisad, other than, except for the introduction and the invocation, which are kind of, sort of separate, there are 4 sections. As I said, there's 18 mantras, but those 18 mantras, except for Prabhupada's introduction And except for the invocation, the 18 mantras are divided into 4 sections. And of course, we've divided them up like that because in each section, there's a different focus, a different type of subject matter. Okay, so we will run through these sections right now. Just a sec, right. Okay, we will run through right now. So first of all, well, let's just say a couple of words about the introduction and the invocation. We've separated them and we've actually made them into a section just between the two of them. Introduction and invocation. So introduction is quite long. It's pretty substantial. And there's quite a lot of information there. And the introduction, it's about, I guess, 4 pages, would you say? Yeah, it's 4 to 5 pages like that, the introduction. It is the transcription of a class given by Srila Prabhupada on Vedic knowledge. What is Vedic knowledge? It was given on October the 6th, 1969, Srila Prabhupada's first visit to London. Yeah, Conway Hall. It was a public program. Srila Prabhupada gave public program. And so basically, as we'll see, because we're going to start reading through it in just, I'd say, the next 5 minutes, Srila Prabhupada talks about the Vedas. Vedas in the sense of being the body of literatures, the Vedas, and Veda meaning knowledge. In fact, as we'll see shortly, Prabhupada says that Veda means knowledge. Veda means knowledge. So in that sense, any knowledge can be called Veda. Don't know who's trying to phone. Any knowledge can be called Veda. But then Srila Prabhupada, in the introduction, he explains how, if we're talking about Veda, meaning just knowledge, the best sort of knowledge in the broad sense, any knowledge, is the Vedas. And as we'll see this evening, Prabhupada goes quite elaborately into how we are not good sources of knowledge. Just in and of ourselves, we are not good sources of knowledge. We need something better. There are different types of sources of knowledge or ways of acquiring knowledge. But ultimately, the best source of knowledge is the Vedas. And, essentially, this is the main part of the introduction. And of course, Prabhupada makes the point that Isopanisad is Vedic. It is part of the Vedas, and therefore it's extremely authoritative and authentic. So that's there in the introduction. Then we go into the invocation. And I think while we're at it, let me just read the invocation to you. It's a famous verse, which Prabhupada, it's just a very famous verse. Just by Vedic standards, this verse gets quoted by all sorts of people from Vedic type backgrounds. Yeah, and it's the invocation of Isopanisad. Om Purnamada Purnabidam Purnat Purnam Udachate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. And because he's completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. So that's the invocation. And there's a purport. It's a moderate-sized purport. It's not it's a page and a half. It's a page and a half, more or less, which is a fair-sized purport. If you look at Prabhupada's purports in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes they're longer, of course, but usually they're not longer than that, maybe usually a bit shorter. So here then, Prabhupada discusses in the purport, it's really, you could say, well, if you're looking on page 8 of our study guide, then you'll see we say that this invocation is describing the objective of the book, which is the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. Yes, personal. And in the verse, in the verse itself, the invocation verse itself, it's interesting. You can count the word complete is used 8 times. 8 times. In other words, the verse, the invocation, is really emphasizing. It's just emphasizing so much how the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, is complete, and anything emanating from him is also complete. Yes. And even though so many complete things come from him, he remains complete. So completeness, that's sort of the theme, the essence of the theme, or, if not the essence exactly of the theme, I mean, you could say it is, but at least it's a very important part, a very important theme amongst the different themes which are discussed in Sri Isopanisad. Okay, so actually we're going to go look through here. Let's have a look at the other sections briefly. So the entering into the text of the book, taking the introduction and the invocation as being introductory. even the invocation as such, as being introductory. So entering into the body of the book, there are the 4 sections we mentioned. So first section is mantra 1, 1, 2, and 3. And as you see there, the subject is proprietorship in the laws of God. Yes. So it's following on from the invocation, the theme of completeness. And as Prabhupada mentions, if you're looking at the guide, then you'll see Prabhupada says, all forms of incompleteness are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. Just for your interest's sake, in the in the purport of the invocation where 8 times the term complete is used, in the purport to the invocation, the term complete is used, as far as I could see, I counted 35 times. Talk about completeness being emphasized. But so Prabhupada comments, all forms of incompleteness are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. So, and there's some other things there. Mantra 1, how we can regain our sense of completeness by connecting with Krishna. This is the Ishavasya consciousness. Mantra 2, the benefits of working in Ishavasya consciousness. Mantra 3, what happens to those who don't? But they disregard the Ishavasya principle. Then the second section is mantras 4 to 8, the vision of the Mahabhagavat, how the advanced devotee sees things. And so mantra 4 explains why people can't understand the Lord. Mantra 5 continues this discussion by pointing out how inconceivable the Lord is. Mantra 6, how Krishna can be seen everywhere. Mantra 7, continuing that theme. And mantra 8, some of the qualities of the Lord as he's perceived by the Mahabhagavat and described in mantras 6 and 7. Then the third section is mantras 9 to 14, which we've called the absolute and the relative. And if you're looking in the study guide, you'll see that we've divided it into 2 subsections, mantras 9, 10, and 11, which are discussing the absolute and the relative in terms of knowledge, and 12, 13, and 14, discussing the absolute and the relative in terms of worship. Yeah, I won't go through the more detailed description there, but that gives the basic idea. And then the fourth section of Isopanisad is mantras 15 to 18, and those are the prayers for revelation of the Lord's spiritual form and for mercy at the time of death. So we say mantras 12, 13, and 14 describe, which we already touched on, the necessity of understanding Krishna. But here, mantra 15 explains we must understand Krishna's relationship with his spiritual potency, the Brahma Jyoti, in order to realize him. 16 is continuing the prayer of mantra 15. Please reveal that your spiritual form. 17 is help me to understand you and approach you at the time of death. And 18 is the concluding prayer. Please be merciful. Please be kind. So there you have it, devotees. That's just, like a very general overview, just so you know what you're getting into here. So let us begin. Let us go into the actual text of Sri Isopanisad as presented by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, translating and commenting on these prayers of the personified Vedas. All right, so here we are then in the introduction. And if you've got your book, then you would see that the BBT, the publishers, they have titled the introduction Teachings of the Vedas. And it was delivered as a lecture by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, on October the 6th, 1969, at Conway Hall, London, England. All right, so we're on page 3, of course, of our text, as we have extracted it from Prabhupada's books and presented it as a textbook for all of you. So let us just launch into the purport. Well, not the purport, but what Prabhupada's class. So paragraph 1. Ladies and gentlemen, today's subject is the teachings of the Vedas. What are the Vedas? The Sanskrit verbal root of Veda can be interpreted variously, but the purport is finally one. Veda means knowledge. Any knowledge you accept is Veda. Any knowledge you accept is Veda. For or but, maybe but would have been a better word to use. The teachings of the Vedas are the original knowledge. You see, now, beginning right here where we are, at this point in the class, Srila Prabhupada is going to distinguish distinguish between the Vedas, Vedic knowledge, and knowledge which is coming from us, you could say. But particularly, he's going to point out how we are just not in a position to be useful, authentic, authoritative sources of knowledge in and of ourselves. Just in and of ourselves. We are just not up to it. And why are we not up to it? Well, here we go. So, Prabhupada, we just read a bit there. Just carrying on from there. In the conditioned state, our knowledge is subjected to many deficiencies. Srila Prabhupada is now from here through the next, what is it now? How many paragraphs? Yeah. The first, this through to the end of the 5th paragraph, Srila Prabhupada is going to discuss in some detail about our defective condition in the conditioned state, where we're just relying on ourselves alone, really, or other defective humans to be sources of knowledge, and we don't have higher sources, like particularly the Vedas. So we have certain defects in this conditioned state, living in the material world. And these 4 defects make us just not worthy to be accepted as sources of knowledge in and of ourselves in the conditioned state. So let's see what Prabhupada says. The difference between a conditioned soul and a liberated soul is that the conditioned soul has 4 defects. So now, Srila Prabhupada, let me just tell you the list of 4. Prabhupada just discusses them one after the other. And of course, we'll go through all of that. But just so you get it to begin with, here are the 4 defects. As Prabhupada presents them here in this introduction. So first is, we have a tendency in our conditioned state to make mistakes. Then second is, we have a tendency to be in illusion, but we are just in illusion. Just from the outset, by definition, a conditioned soul means a person who is in illusion. Not exactly like mistakes. We may sometimes make mistakes, but sometimes not. But we are always in illusion in our conditioned state. Then third is the propensity to cheat. That's a nasty one. And fourth is we have imperfect senses. For those of you interested in the Sanskrit terms, then to make mistakes is called Brahma, B-H-R-A-M-A, Brahma, B-H-R-A-M-A. To be in illusion is called Pramada, P-R-A-M-A-D-A, Pramada. Cheating is called Vipralipsa, V-I-P-R-A-L-I-P-S-A, Vipralipsa. To have imperfect senses is called in Sanskrit Karanapatava. Karanapatava. K-A-R-A-N-A-P-A-T-A-V-A, one word. So this, Prabhupada has introduced this by saying that the difference between the conditioned soul and the liberated soul is that the conditioned soul has these 4 defects: mistakes, illusion, cheating, and imperfect senses. But the liberated soul then does not have these defects, And there's a couple of verses here I'd just like to point out to you. You can note them down if you like, in which Shastra describes these or talks of these defects and how they do not exist in the liberated souls or the Supreme Lord. So just note down these verse numbers. They're both Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila. They're both Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila. So the first one is chapter 2, verse 86 to 86. The second one is chapter 7, verse 107. And let me just read them. Brahma pramada vipralipsa karana patava arsha vigya vakye nahi dosha ehi e sabha. Mistakes, illusions, cheating, and defective perception do not occur in the sayings of the authoritative sages. That's Adi Lila chapter 2, verse 86, and Adi Lila chapter 7, verse 107. Brahma pramada vipralipsa karana patava ishvarera vakye nahi dosha e sabha. The material defects of mistakes, illusion, cheating, and sensory inefficiency do not exist in the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All right, so now, like I said, the way Srila Prabhupada discusses these is one after the other. And first of all is making mistakes, Brahma. So Srila Prabhupada gives two examples, mainly one, but he mentions a second example of very prominent people, extremely prominent people who were taken extremely seriously by the people in general. First of all, Mahatma Gandhi, and it's Prabhupada mainly focuses on Mahatma Gandhi. Then he also mentions President Kennedy, who was assassinated. I mean, they were both assassinated. And they were assassinated because they made mistakes, particularly Gandhi, as Prabhupada discusses here. Gandhi was warned the day or the evening, sort of late afternoon, evening, something like that, of the day he was shot. He was warned that it seems there may be a plot to kill you, to shoot you. So better you don't go to the prayer meeting this evening. Just stay in your rooms. What had happened, well, he was staying actually in one of the Bela temples, would you believe, in Delhi. It's still there. The place is still there. In fact, when I first went to India, that was the first place we stayed for a couple of days in Delhi. So, and every evening at a set time, there would be a prayer meeting maybe in the temple room itself, but in a different room, different building in the complex. And he had to walk across a lawn to reach there. The night before, someone had climbed up the wall, the outer wall of the whole temple complex, the wall overlooking the lawn. Someone had climbed up on the outside. There was an alleyway, climbed up on the outside. So they're looking over the wall, over the lawn at that time. And the person had a gun. But someone just happened to walk down the alleyway or little road, whatever it was. And the person who was on the wall with the gun panicked and ran and dropped the gun. And they found the gun. Just right then, they found the gun. So they understood that, you know, it looks like someone wants to kill Gandhi, because Gandhi, although he was extremely popular, he had enemies too. He had some pretty heavy enemies. Yeah. So therefore, that was their understanding. Therefore, they warned him, don't go this evening. But he thought, no, I'll go. But that same person was waiting in the lawn and walked up to him and what? Namaste, something namaste, gun, bang. And that was the end of Gandhi.
Point close, right?
One?
Point close, what they call it, right? In the
Point blank. Point blank.
Oh, point blank, yeah. Yeah, just from a foot or two away. And that was the end of Mahatma Gandhi. He made a mistake. To err, and Prabhupada says, I think, yeah, Prabhupada says, to err is human. Who of us has never made a stupid mistake and afterwards thought, why did I do that? How did I do that? Yes, so Prabhupada gives this as an example, the main example here, of someone who made a mistake, a bad mistake, oh my gosh, and he paid with his life. And Prabhupada also mentions President Kennedy, and I don't know actually about, you know, in terms of his being assassinated, I don't know what, if he was warned not to go or what, I don't know about that. But Srila Prabhupada mentions Kennedy, and definitely Kennedy did make plenty of mistakes. Yeah. So this is one defect of the conditioned soul. And now the second paragraph, another defect, to be illusioned. And Prabhupada gives a simple definition. Illusion means to accept something which is not. Maya. Maya means what is not. So if we accept something which is not something, but we accept it as being that something, we're an illusion. And the classic example Srila Prabhupada gives, that everyone is accepting the body as the self. Who is not doing that amongst the conditioned souls? It's basically universal. Of course, the liberated souls, or even just ourselves as aspiring devotees, at least we have that understanding, we accept that, and there's a logic behind it, how we are not this body, how this body is our body, not me body. But otherwise, generally, people accept the body as the self. And Prabhupada says, if I ask you, what are you? You'll say, I'm Mr. John, I'm a rich man, I'm this, I'm that. All bodily identifications. But you're not this body. This is an illusion. And then the third defect is the cheating propensity. Everyone everyone has the tendency to cheat. And Prabhupada gives very interesting example that although a person is not very intelligent, not very knowledgeable, even Prabhupada says fool number one. That's pretty foolish. To be fool number one, that's pretty foolish. So the person, the foolish conditioned soul, in other words, he's talking about the conditioned souls. The person who is in illusion, doesn't know who they are. They think they're someone who they are not, but they think, yes, I am this person. How foolish is that? And making many mistakes. But such a person will think that, yes, I have this opinion, I have that opinion, as Prabhupada says. I think this is this, I think this is that. But he doesn't even know his own position. So what sort of cheating is that? It's bad cheating. Like, just one example, when we were at school, we were taught about the theory of evolution, a little bit. I don't know about yourselves, but in our school, we were taught a little bit about the theory of evolution. And initially we were told, yes, Darwin, Charles Darwin, theory of evolution. But then when we got into more detail, what is the idea of evolution? It wasn't really presented as a theory. It was presented more like it was a fact. Yeah. So this is cheating, to present something which is simply a theory, and which, of course, in fact, is not actually true anyway. But to present it like it's a fact, it's cheating. So an interesting little point is that the word cheater and the word teacher, they're almost the same. It's just the T and the CH have been turned around, replaced each other, and cheater becomes teacher, or teacher becomes cheater. Yeah. So these people, they write books, as Prabhupada says, books of philosophy, although they don't even know who they are. But they're trying to tell us what is life and what is the best thing to do and how to live and how not to live and all that sort of thing. It's cheating. Okay, devotees, so we will continue with tomorrow night with paragraph 5 of the introduction. For this first week, actually, we're just going to study the introduction and the invocation. So we will be going in some detail. So tomorrow then, we'll start with paragraph 5 of the introduction. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.